This place was completely dead. No birds, no shade, no life, just dry soil, broken branches, and silence. If you walked through here a year ago, you wouldn't think anything could grow. And honestly, neither did I. But today, look at it. Green shoots pushing through the ground, leaves catching sunlight, insects returning, birds slowly coming back. Life where there was none. And all of this started with one decision: to plant 1,000 trees in a place everyone had given up on. But here's the part that shocked me the most. It wasn't the number of trees or even the growth. It was how fast everything started to change once the right conditions were in place. Because restoring a forest isn't just about planting trees, it's about understanding how life rebuilds itself. And if you stay with me, I'll show you exactly what worked, what failed, and the 3 lessons from this project that completely changed how I think about growing anything, whether it's a forest or a single plant in your home, or... Now, before we go deeper, let me give you some context. I've spent years growing plants, starting from small indoor setups to building thriving green spaces. And like most people, I made a lot of mistakes early on. Overwatering, poor soil choices, planting at the wrong time. I've seen plants fail in almost every way possible. But over time, patterns start to appear. You begin to understand what plants we need, not assume they need. And this project, planting 1,000 trees in a dead forest, was the ultimate test of everything I've learned. So, let's go back to the beginning. When I first saw this land, the soil was dry and compacted. Years of neglect had stripped it of nutrients. There was no shade, which meant intense sunlight during the day and rapid moisture loss. Even the wind seemed harsher here. It wasn't just a place without trees. It was a place where conditions worked against growth. And that's where the first big lesson comes in. You know, the first thing most people get wrong about planting trees, or even just caring for plants, is thinking that the plant itself is the starting point. But, well, it's not. The environment is. Because you can plant the strongest, healthiest tree you can find. But if the soil, the moisture, and the microclimate aren't right, it just won't survive. So, instead of rushing to plant all 1,000 trees at once, I started with the ground. And this is where, honestly, something interesting happened. Instead of trying to fix everything at once, I focused on small changes. Loosening the soil, adding organic matter, and creating slight depressions to hold water. Nothing dramatic, really. But just enough to give the first group of trees a chance. And here's the part most people don't expect. Not all of them survived. In fact, a significant number didn't make it past the first few months. And, you know, that could have been discouraging. But actually, it revealed something important. The land was teaching me what it needed. Some areas retain moisture better than others. Some spots were just too exposed to the wind. And some species, well, they adapted faster than others. And this leads to the second big lesson. Not all plants or trees are meant for every environment. And you know, this is something plant stores rarely emphasize. They sell you the plant, but they don't always tell you whether your environment is right for it. In this forest, the trees that survived weren't necessarily the strongest. They were the most adaptable. Native species, drought-resistant varieties, and trees that could handle poor soil conditions. So, instead of forcing the land to accept the trees, I adjusted the trees to match the land, and once I did that, survival rates improved dramatically. Growth became more consistent, and slowly the space began to change. Now, here's where things get interesting, because once a few trees started to survive, something unexpected happened. The soil began to improve on its own. Leaves fell and decomposed, adding nutrients back into the ground. Shade reduced evaporation. Moisture levels stabilized. It created a small but powerful feedback loop. And this is the third lesson. Growth creates the conditions for more growth. Once life starts, it supports more life. And, this applies to everything from forests to indoor plants. When your plant is healthy, it becomes more resilient. It uses water more efficiently. It grows stronger roots. Everything builds on itself. But I want to pause here for a moment, because if you're watching this and thinking about your own plants, maybe struggling to keep them alive or wondering what you're doing wrong, I've put together a simple plant care checklist that breaks all of this down into easy steps you can follow at home. It's completely free, and you'll find it in the description below. It'll help you avoid the same mistakes I made early on. Now, let's fast forward a bit. Months into the project, something changed. The air felt different, cooler, slightly more humid. Insects started appearing, first a few, then more. And then one day I noticed birds. Not many, just a few, but enough to tell me something was shifting. Because when birds return, it means the ecosystem is beginning to recover. It means there's food, shelter, and balance starting to form again. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just about trees anymore. It was about rebuilding a system. And here's the part that most people don't see in videos like this. The waiting, the uncertainty, the moments where nothing seems to be happening. Because growth isn't always visible. For months it looked like very little had changed. But underground, roots were spreading. Soil life was rebuilding. Systems were forming. And then, suddenly, everything accelerated. Leaves became fuller. Growth became more noticeable. The space started to look alive again. Not perfect, but alive. 1 year later, this is what it became. Not a fully restored forest, but no longer dead. A place with potential. A place where life has returned and will continue to grow. And if there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. Whether you're growing a forest or a single plant in your home, the principles are the same. Focus on the environment. Choose the right plants. Be patient and trust the process. Because growth doesn't happen overnight, but when it does happen, it transforms everything. Now, if you want to go deeper, if you want to learn how to grow plants successfully step by step, avoid common mistakes, and create your own thriving green space, I've put together a complete plant care guide that walks you through everything. You can find it in the link below. And if this story inspired you, taught you something new, or made you see plant growth differently, subscribe to Leaf and Ladder, share this with someone who loves nature, and be part of a growing community that's bringing life back into spaces one leaf at a time.